Hello everyone. Today we're going to brew a cup of snow dragon tea. Now if you look up snow dragon on Google, you'll see many teas go by that name. In Chinese it's called Xue Long, Xuelong. And the one that I have today is from one of my favorite purveyors. It's Silk Road Teas. So this is their particular version of it. It's rather a nice thick leaf, and what I like about it is that it is very similar to my favorite tea, which I've talked about, Longjing Dragonwell tea. See if I can get you some samples here so you can kind of see its thickness. Not being too successful here. Yes, there you go. Hopefully you can see something there rather than my big hand. Get an idea of what that looks like. Again, kind of a very flat tea. It's pan roasted, and I really enjoy this tea because I enjoy Longjing, and this is very, very similar with a very complex nutty flavor with a slight sweetness. And so we're going to brew that cup here. Today is always something from nature, always to relax us. Today I brought some rose petals. We had this beautiful rose in our garden. My wife had recently acquired a rose bush last year, and the roses came up, and my goodness, they had the sweetest aroma, and the petals, although the rose now has unfortunately died, the petals are still giving over this remarkable scent. It's not even a rose scent. I mean, it's almost like this. It has this fruity, rosy scent to it. I guess there's a little bit of rose in there, but it's not the conventional rose scent. Anyway, I just can't get enough of it. I mean, when you get a right aroma, it's really viscerally relaxing. So that's our little nature. So it doesn't always have to be alive, fresh. It can be leaves, it can be a sprig, it can be something that, just enables us to relax. Let me just get the tea brewing here. About 185 degrees. I have about 3 grams in here, and I'm going to fill it up with about 6 ounces of water, or 5 ounces, essentially about 150 milligrams. Again, that's something you can get a measuring jug, because some tea companies, they do it in milligrams, sometimes, the amount of water, sometimes in ounces. Sometimes the weight is in grams, sometimes it's in ounces, sometimes it's in, fluid ounces for the water, of course, ounces for the weight. And sometimes the weight is in ounces, sometimes it's in grams. So, thank goodness for Google, right? What is grams and what is ounces, and you just kind of sort it out, and gradually you get the hang of it with practice. Again, I have the Snow Dragon tea in a lovely canister. Again, that gives me pleasure. And today I brought this new ceramic piece. I mean, I've had it for many years, but it's new in terms of tea and overtones. A nice ceramic piece. It was quite inexpensive. I bought it many years ago in a gift shop, but it has this, the idea is like it's crumpled paper. I don't know if you can quite see that, but it actually looks like someone's taken some paper and crumpled it up, and that's the kind of design of the cup. So it makes it quite fascinating. I like that it's white, because then I get to see the color of the tea, which is an essential part, as is the aroma of the tea itself. Let's talk about Wu Wei. I think we've talked about it before, maybe not, maybe certainly in Spiral Wave, one of these sessions that I do. Wu Wei, W-U-W-E-I. It means non-action, or non-forcing, or effortless action. And I always look at it in terms of effortless action. In other words, it's not like this to do something. It kind of is done effortlessly. And it's a very Taoist concept, and I think we use it in the spiral wave when we say, like, you're not doing anything. And also with the abdominal breathing, if you follow that, we're not doing anything. We're letting things take their natural course. We're not interfering. Let me just pour the tea here. Again, I can really smell the aroma of the tea, which is really very, very nice. Again, tea should be absolutely a pleasurable moment for you. That's really the key. It should always be very pleasurable. I'm just shaking the water loose here, because we want to have that pause, that moment where the world with all its problems or our problems or whatever we're dealing with stops. And we're just with the tea and we're in the moment. But effortless action is just an extraordinary concept, and perhaps we'll be discussing it more in these tea and overtones, because it really relates to the harmonic self in such a beautiful way. And essentially, non-action, or it's really where we are not kind of the doer. The ego is not the doing, but more a place of being, a place of naturalness. So back to the abdominal breathing, where we allow the breath to settle and the mind to settle, and in the sense you heard me talk about the tea leaves settling through the body. So we're not forcing ourselves to be relaxed. We're just allowing things to relax. It's almost like we're letting gravity do its job without any resistance. So it's almost like we're doing nothing except allowing the natural course of events. And that's really what effortless action involves. Now, one of the prime stories of effortless action is in what's called the Zhuangzi. The Zhuangzi is a book, a Taoist book. You've probably heard of Lao Tzu's book, the Tao Te Ching. Well, the Zhuangzi, or the Chuang Tzu, is another way of pronouncing it more popularly in the West, is a book by the name of the author, Chuang Tzu, and it's a Taoist book. And in it, there's stories. And he tells the story of Cook Ding. And I want to tell you about Cook Ding. It's relevant to Wu Wei. Cook Ding was a butcher, and Cook Ding was performing a ceremony for a Lord Wenhui. And the ceremony was, his involvement was he was cutting up an ox. That's a big animal, an ox, and he decided to, that was his job, to cut it up. Well, of course, it's kind of pretty revolting to us just to have to watch an ox being cut up. But Cook Ding was exceptional. He performed it. He did it like it was a performance art, like it was a work of art, like it was a dance. It was like effortless action. And Lord Wenwei was just very, very impressed as Cook Ding went through the actions, the motions so smoothly, so beautifully, so elegantly, so artistically. Lord Wenwei said, how can such skill be attained? And Cook Ding put down his knife, and he said that when I first started, he said, I looked at the ox as a whole. And then after about 3 years, I began to see beyond the ox. And he said, and now, he said, I don't see the ox at all. My perceptions have so changed that I just allow spirit to do the work. And I follow the spirit. This is what he's actually saying. This is actually in the book. And he said, like, I'm not interested in skills. I'm only interested in the Tao. And of course, then he goes on to explain the blade. He says that for a mediocre chef, their blade needs to be resharpened once a month. He said for a skilled chef, their blade needs to be sharpened once a year. And he said that the reason the mediocre chef needs it once a month is because they hack at what they're doing. He said the skilled chef is once a year because they cut what they're doing. He said, but I've had my blade for 19 years and I've never had to resharpen it because my blade doesn't touch the animal. He said, I find the spaces between the joints, and my blade, which has no thickness, goes between the tendons and the spaces, and the ox falls apart. And he said, when I come to a complicated place, I slow down, I take my time, I work, I look at it carefully, I pay attention, and then find the spaces that my blade can then move between. And then, boom, plop, the animal falls like a clod of earth and opens up. Lord Wen goes, Lord Wen Hui goes, wow, Cook Ding has given me a lesson for life. Now, it's a very interesting story and extraordinary metaphor. I love the aroma of a long jing, and this is similar, not the same. It's a different tea, although of course all tea, as we've talked about many times, comes from the same plant, same tree, Camellia sinensis. If it's not Camellia sinensis, it's not really officially tea. Just like I said, kind of a complex flavor, a nuttiness, which I really like. Kind of a little bit of an umami, where it's, the equivalent would be a dry wine, where you kind of feel like it sucks in and there's a little bit of puckering, a little bit of that. And then a little bit of finished sweetness. So it's got a lot in it. And that feeling of like you really want to take your time over it. And that to me is a good tea. You know, it's a pleasure with each sip. Now, with Cook Ding, clearly this is a metaphor, particularly when Lord Wenhui says, it's a lesson of life. I mean, after all, he's just cut up this ox in front of this ceremony, which couldn't have been pleasant to look at, except if you look at it as a metaphor, particularly when he says, the edge of my blade has no thickness. I was like, how could that possibly be? And of course, he's talking about consciousness. And he's talking about when we kind of hack at something, we're just wasting energy. I mean, our blade needs to be repaired, which we could say is wear and tear on our body. And what pleasure is it, except if we have an adversary, giving them pleasure, watching us strain away. So that this effortless idea is to find the space in our consciousness between things. And we've talked about this a lot, differently in a Japanese concept of ma, of space. But this, and leaning back a little bit, but here we just see this bit of leaning back, not that it's mentioned, but this idea of when it gets complicated, just to take stock of things and find the spaces, exactly what we've talked about. The Ma Otoro moving through the space, and Cook Ding is using his blade to go through the spaces. And if we can just step back and just be still and let our personality take a back seat and let the spirit move us, we may find that the most complicated situations, the ones that we really feel stuck, suddenly we see the spaces. Our consciousness can enter them because it has no thickness. And then, boom, just like the ox, everything just falls apart with no effort. And we find the solutions that we've been looking for appear to us because we followed the spirit. And then at that point, we're not the doer. The spirit is the doer. And we're more in our being. And the doing comes out of that, but that it becomes effortless on our part. So perhaps this day, or perhaps even tomorrow if it's the evening for you, there's situations where you're stuck. See if you can apply the lesson from Cook Ding to your life and see how things open up that were previously closed. Bei Shan.